Under the fractured moon, a lone wolf's shadow stretched like a scar across the frozen earth, whispering of promises broken and fates yet to bleed. Nyla Reed stumbled through the whispering pines, her breath a ragged ghost in the biting wind that clawed at her threadbare cloak. The forest shrine loomed ahead, its ancient stones etched with lunar runes that glowed faintly silver in the moonlight, as if the goddess herself mourned the exile unfolding beneath her gaze. Snowflakes danced like fallen stars, settling on her lashes, each one a cold reminder of the pack's verdict: rejected, banished. Left to the mercy of the wilds, where omegas like her were fodder for rogues and the endless hunger of winter. Her fingers clutched the silver locket at her throat, its chain a fragile tether to the life she'd known. Inside, a lock of fur from her mother, dark as midnight, soft as forgotten dreams, pressed against her skin. It was the only inheritance she'd been allowed, a symbol of the bloodline that had once meant something in the Silver Fang pack. Now it felt like a curse, heavy with the weight of her shame. The Alpha's words echoed in her mind, sharp as thorns. "You are no mate for a warrior's line. Weakness has no place among us." Alaric's rejection had been public, his hand shoving her from the great hall into the storm-swept night, the pack's howls a chorus of disdain. She was Omega, unmarked, unclaimed, tainted by a vision she dared to voice, a prophetic whisper of shadows encroaching on their borders. Madness, they called it, delusion born of her lowly station. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the distant rumble of thunder that wasn't thunder at all. Rogue packs stirring in the shadowed vales, drawn by the scent of vulnerability. Nyla's bare feet sank into the snow, numb and bleeding from jagged rocks hidden beneath the white veil. Pain was her constant companion now, a visceral throb that mirrored the ache in her chest. What was strength if not enduring the freeze that sought to claim her? She pressed on, driven by the shrine's pull, a sacred hollow where outcasts sought the goddess's fleeting grace. Legends spoke of it as a crossroads of destinies, where the moon's light could reveal hidden paths or seal them forever. As she crested the ridge, the shrine revealed itself fully. A circle of weathered obelisks surrounding a frozen pool, its surface a mirror to the indifferent stars. Torches long extinguished left only the moon's pallid glow, casting long shadows that twisted like specters. Nyla collapsed against one of the stones, her body shivering not just from cold, but from the hollow void of abandonment. Tears froze on her cheeks, salty rivulets turning to ice. She unclasped the locket, holding it to her lips, inhaling the faint, earthy scent of her mother's essence. "Why me?" she whispered to the night, her voice swallowed by the wind. The goddess offered no reply, only the soft patter of snow and the distant, mournful uivo of a wolf echoing her solitude. In the silence that followed, a deeper chill seeped into her bones. Footsteps, crunching, deliberate, approached from the tree line. Nyla's heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs as she scrambled behind the obelisk, her instincts screaming of danger. Rogues? The pack's hunters come to finish what exile began? She peered through the veil of branches, her breath held like a prayer. He emerged from the gloom like a specter forged of night and storm, tall, broad-shouldered, his fur-lined mantle torn and dusted with frost. King Derek Thorn, Alpha of the Ironclaw realm, his face a map of scars illuminated by the moon's unforgiving light. His eyes, golden as forge fire, scanned the shrine with a predator's wariness, but beneath the regal poise lurked something fractured, a weariness that spoke of battles lost not on fields of war, but in the chambers of his soul. Guilt clung to him like the bloodstains on his gauntlets, dark and accusing. Whispers of his past had reached even the fringes of Silverfang, a king who had led his people to ruin through a single act of mercy, sparing a traitor's life only for betrayal to claim his queen and heir. Now he wandered these borderlands, a shadow king in exile from his own throne, haunted by the ghosts of choices that could not be unmade. Derek's breath clouded the air, heavy with the scent of pine resin and iron, blood, fresh and metallic. He had come to the shrine seeking solace, or perhaps absolution, drawn by the same lunar call that guided lost souls. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, the blade etched with runes of ancient oaths. The weight of his crown, absent yet ever present, pressed upon him like the snow's relentless burden. What redemption could a king find in a forsaken place when his heart bled for the innocent lives his hesitation had doomed? Nyla's pulse thundered in her ears, fear warring with an inexplicable pull, a thread of instinct that tugged at her core, omega to alpha, drawing her gaze to the locket now warm against her skin. It pulsed faintly, as if awakened by his nearness, its silver surface catching the moonlight in a way that mirrored the king's eyes. She should flee, vanish into the woods like the ghost she had become. Yet curiosity rooted her, a dangerous bloom in the frost. Who was this stranger, marked by sorrow as deeply as she by rejection? The wind shifted, carrying his scent to her, smoke and storm, laced with the raw edge of vulnerability. He paused at the pool's edge, kneeling to trace a rune with a gloved finger, his movements deliberate, reverent. The snow around him seemed to hush, as if the forest held its breath. Nyla watched, transfixed, the cold forgotten in the heat of this unforeseen encounter. In that moment, under the moon's watchful eye, their paths converged, not in clash, but in the quiet prelude to something profound and perilous. The locket thrummed against her chest, a heartbeat not entirely her own, whispering of destinies entwined in blood and fire yet to come. But the night was not done with its trials. From the shadows beyond the shrine, low growls rose, rogues, their eyes gleaming like embers in the dark, circling the sacred ground with hunger and malice. Nyla's fear ignited into terror, her body tensing as the first snarl shattered the fragile peace. The growls swelled into a savage chorus, ripping through the shrine's fragile sanctity like claws through flesh. Nyla's heart seized, the locket's warmth now a mocking pulse against the terror flooding her veins. Shadows detached from the tree line. 7 rogues, their forms twisted and feral, pelts matted with the grime of endless wandering. Their eyes burned with the red haze of madness, lips peeled back over fangs that dripped with anticipation. They were the forsaken alphas and betas alike, driven mad by rejection's poison, now predators in a world that had spat them out. She shrank deeper behind the obelisk, her breath shallow, the snow's chill seeping into her marrow. The king, Derek, snapped upright, his hand flying to his sword with the fluid grace of one born to command tempests. Moonlight glinted off the blade as he drew it, the runes igniting in faint blue fire, casting ethereal flickers across his scarred features. He did not flee. Instead, he positioned himself between the encroaching pack and the shrine's heart, his stance a bulwark of unyielding resolve. But Nyla saw the flicker in his golden eyes, a weariness that betrayed the king beneath the warrior, the man who carried ghosts heavier than any crown. The lead rogue lunged first, a hulking brute with fur scarred by old battles, his howl a guttural challenge that shook the frozen pool. Darek met him mid-air, sword slicing through the night with a whistle of steel on wind. Blood sprayed. Dark and steaming against the snow, painting crimson arcs that steamed in the cold. The rogue crumpled, but his packmates surged forward, a whirlwind of snarls and snapping jaws. Nyla's instincts screamed, run, hide, survive. But her body betrayed her, frozen in the grip of something primal. The locket burned hotter now, its chain biting into her skin like a warning or a summons. One rogue broke through, veering toward her hiding place, its yellowed eyes locking onto her with predatory glee. Time fractured. She could smell its fetid breath, feel the heat of its rage cutting through the frost. Without thought, Nyla bolted from cover, snatching a loose stone from the shrine's edge, a jagged relic etched with lunar script. She hurled it with desperate force, striking the beast's flank. It yelped, staggering, but the distraction cost her. Another rogue flanked her, claws raking the air inches from her arm. "Run!" The word tore from her throat, raw and commanding, as she shoved at the king's back, or tried to. Her hands met the unyielding wall of his mantle, fingers brushing the warmth of muscle beneath. Derek whirled, his gaze crashing into hers like thunder meeting lightning. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that connection. Omega fear meeting alpha fire, curiosity igniting in the space between terror and defiance. She saw it then, the fracture in him, not weakness, but a depth carved by loss, mirroring her own exile's void. The locket thrummed in rhythm with her pulse, as if recognizing kin in his shadowed soul. But he did not run. His eyes blazed, golden flames defying the encroaching dark. "No," he growled, low and resonant, the sound vibrating through her like the earth's own rumble. Pivoting back, he surged into the fray beside her, not ahead, not protecting from afar, but shoulder to shoulder. His sword sang again, cleaving a path through the chaos, while Nyla dodged and struck with whatever the shrine offered, stones, branches, her own nails raking fur. They fought back to back, an instinctive symmetry born of the moment's forge. His presence was a storm at her side, the scent of smoke and iron enveloping her, his movements a dance of lethal precision that warded the cold from her bones. A rogue leaped at her, jaws wide. Derek's blade intercepted, severing its throat in a spray of hot blood that splattered her cheek, warm and metallic against the frieze. She gasped, the intimacy of it shocking, his protection not as savior, but as equal in the blood-soaked rite. Another beast charged him from the flank. Nyla swung a fallen torch, its embers long dead but the wood heavy, cracking it across the rogue's muzzle. It recoiled, giving him space to finish it. Their breaths mingled in the frenzy, ragged harmonies amid the weavos and clashes. The snow churned to bloody slush beneath their feet. In the heart of it, as fangs grazed his arm and drew his own blood, dark rivulets tracing scars old and new, Derek glanced at her, eyes locking once more. Not with pity, but recognition. Her courage, raw and unpolished, matched the fire he'd thought extinguished in himself. She was no fragile thing to shield. She stood beside him, her defiance a mirror to his own buried resolve. The locket pulsed brighter, its silver glow sinking with the moon's descent, as if the goddess wove their threads in this crucible of survival. The last rogue fell with a gurgling whine, Derek's sword buried in its chest. Silence descended, broken only by their heaving breaths and the distant wind's lament. Blood steamed on the snow, the shrine's runes flickering as if in approval or warning. Nyla's legs buckled, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave, but his hand steadied her arm, firm yet gentle, the touch sending an unwelcome spark through her core. Instinct urged her to pull away, fear of this alpha's power, curiosity of his pain. But the night's trial had forged something undeniable. A bond, fragile as frost, born from shared defiance. He sheathed his sword, wiping blood from his face with a gauntleted hand, his gaze never leaving hers. "You fought like a queen," he murmured, voice roughened by battle, laced with a melancholy that tugged at her guarded heart. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Who was this king, marked by guilt's chains? And why did standing beside him feel like glimpsing a path through her exile's storm? They retreated to the shrine's inner circle, the obelisks forming a natural bastion against the encroaching woods. Derek kindled a small fire from shrine-tended branches, flames leaping to life with a crackle that chased the shadows. Warmth bloomed, thawing the ice in her veins, but the empathy stirring within her was warmer still, a tentative bridge over the chasm of their separate wounds. As the fire danced, casting golden flickers on the locket's surface, Nyla felt the pull deepen, curiosity blooming into something perilously like trust. Yet denial lingered, a rational whisper. He was Alpha, she Omega, worlds apart. Even in refuge. The night watched, moon veiled by clouds, as their vigil began, enemies silenced, but the true trials of heart and fate only dawning. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The fire's tentative glow licked at the shrine's stones, casting elongated shadows that danced like wary spirits across the frozen pool. Nyla sat huddled against an obelisk, her knees drawn to her chest, the locket's chain now slick with sweat and blood, its weight a constant anchor amid the night's unraveling. The warmth seeped into her chilled skin, but it was the king's proximity that truly thawed the edges of her isolation. A presence, both fortress and enigma, his broad frame silhouetted against the flames as he tended the blaze with deliberate care. Smoke curled upward, carrying the acrid tang of charred wood and spilled blood, mingling with the metallic bite that still clung to her tongue from the rogue's final spray. Darek's golden eyes reflected the firelight, softened yet haunted, as he glanced her way. He had stripped off his gauntlets, revealing forearms corded with muscle and etched with scars, pale lines like frozen rivers, each one a silent testament to battles that had claimed more than flesh. One wound, fresh from the fray, wept crimson down his arm, staining the snow-dusted earth. He made no move to bind it, as if pain were an old companion, unworthy of interruption. Nyla's gaze lingered there, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name, not pity, but a recognition of shared fracture. Her own hands trembled, nails broken and dirt-streaked, the sting of scratches a minor echo of his deeper cuts. The locket pulsed warmly against her collarbone, sinking with the fire's crackle, as if it sensed the fragile truce forming in the air between them. "You needn't have stayed," she murmured, her voice a threadbare whisper, barely rising above the wind's low moan through the pines. The words carried the weight of her denial, a rational barrier against the pull she felt, the Omega's innate draw to Alpha strength, complicated by the exile's wariness. He was no savior from her pack's scorn. He was a stranger, a king adrift, his scent of smoke and storm invading her senses like an uninvited claim. Yet in the fight's aftermath, empathy had stirred, unbidden. Seeing him pivot back, choosing solidarity over flight, had cracked something in her guarded heart. What was mercy, if not standing in the blood with another soul's shadows? Darek's lips curved in a faint, melancholy smile, devoid of triumph. He tore a strip from his mantle's hem, already ragged from thorns and claws, and bound his wound with practiced efficiency, the fabric absorbing the red seep like earth drinking rain. "And leave you to the wolves alone? No, little one. The goddess binds us in moments like these, whether we will it or not." His tone was low, resonant, laced with the gravity of one who had stared into duty's abyss too long. He shifted closer, offering a water skin from his pack, the leather cracked and weathered like his resolve. Nyla hesitated, her fingers brushing his as she accepted it. The contact electric, a spark that raced up her arm, igniting curiosity amid the fear. His touch was calloused, warm despite the cold, and for a fleeting instant, she glimpsed the man beneath the crown's ghost, ethical, burdened, his guilt a cloak heavier than any fur. She drank deeply, the cool water washing away the battle's grit. But it couldn't cleanse the questions rising in her chest. The shrine's runes flickered in the firelight, silver veins pulsing like veins in living stone, and the locket seemed to hum in response, its inner lock of fur brushing her skin like a mother's distant warning. "Why are you here?" she asked, handing back the skin, her eyes searching his. A king doesn't wander border shrines without purpose. Fleeing your own ghosts? The words escaped sharper than intended, born of her own raw edges, the rejection that had stripped her bare, leaving her to question every alpha's intent. He paused, the fire's glow hollowing his cheeks, accentuating the scar that bisected his brow, a mark from the betrayal that had felled his realm, or so the whispers went. Darek's gaze drifted to the flames where embers swirled like trapped stars. Guilt is a relentless hunter, he admitted, voice roughened by truths long unspoken. I spared a traitor's life once, thinking compassion a king's strength. It cost me everything, my queen, my son, the Iron Claw's heart. Now I seek the moon's judgment, to know if redemption is folly or fate. His confession hung in the air, vulnerable as exposed flesh, and Nyla felt it pierce her own armor. Empathy bloomed, tentative and tender, transforming the space between them from wary distance to shared vigil. She knew exile's bite, the shame of being deemed unworthy. He carried a throne's weight in his sorrow. The locket warmed further, as if the goddess wove their pains into a single thread. The night deepened, wind whispering secrets through the obelisks, but refuge settled like a fragile peace. Darek added branches to the fire, sparks ascending like prayers, and Nyla found herself speaking, halting at first, then freer. She told of Alaric's rejection, the pack's howls mocking her prophetic vision of encroaching shadows, the locket her sole heirloom from a mother lost to fever. They called me weak, a delusion's vessel. But what if the shadows come, and no one heeds? Her voice cracked, the admission a release, vulnerability met not with scorn, but quiet understanding. Darek nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a depth that stirred the bond's roots. Strength isn't in claws or crowns, but in choosing to see what others blind themselves to. You've a fire in you, Nyla, unmarked perhaps, but unyielding. The use of her name on his lips was intimate, a bridge across their worlds, and she felt the pull intensify, instinct urging acceptance even as reason recoiled. He was Alpha, she Omega. He, a king in shadows, she, an outcast. Yet in this circle of stone and flame, protection flowed both ways, his sword, her shield, her defiance his mirror. A distant howl pierced the calm, not rogue but something wilder, echoing from the veils. They tensed, backs to the fire, eyes scanning the tree line where moonlight silvered the snow like a blade's edge. No threat emerged, but the sound lingered, a reminder that enemies, be they beasts or betrayals, circled still. Nyla's hand drifted to the locket, its pulse steady now, sinking with his breath beside her. Empathy had kindled into bond, fragile as the fire's light, born of mutual wounds and the night's unforgiving gaze. But as dawn's first gray tinged the horizon, a deeper dilemma stirred in her soul. Could she trust this connection, or would it drag her deeper into a destiny that demanded more than survival, demanded surrender to the very power she'd fled? The shrine held them in its lunar embrace, the air thick with unspoken vows, as the wind carried whispers of trials yet to unfold. Dawn's pallid fingers clawed at the horizon, bleeding gray light across the shrine's frozen expanse. But the fire's embers still whispered defiance against the encroaching chill. Nyla shifted uneasily on the hard stone. The locket's warmth now an insistent throb against her skin, like a second heart awakening in the quiet aftermath of their vigil. The night had woven them closer, his confessions of guilt, her tales of scorn, but trust remained a fragile thread, taut with the Omega's wariness and the Alpha's shadowed restraint. Darek sat across the flames, his form a sentinel of quiet strength, golden eyes tracing the runes on the obelisks as if seeking answers in their ancient script. The air hung heavy with the scent of smoldering wood and drying blood. The winds sigh through the pines carrying faint weavos from distant ridges, a reminder that the wilds never truly slept. She watched him, the firelight carving hollows in his face, illuminating the scar that spoke of betrayals deeper than any blade's cut. Empathy had rooted in her during the hours of shared silence, blooming into a curiosity that tugged at her core, but denial lingered like frost on her breath. He was a king, marked by duty's iron yoke. She, an exile, her prophetic whispers dismissed as madness. Yet the locket pulsed in rhythm with the shrine's faint glow, its silver surface catching the first light, and Neela felt a stir within, a dormant ember, long suppressed by rejection's weight. What if her visions were not delusion, but the goddess's veiled gift? The thought stirred fear, a visceral chill that warred with the fire's heat, her fingers instinctively closing around the locket, the lock of fur inside soft as a forgotten prayer. Darrick's gaze met hers then, piercing the dawn's veil, and in that moment, the world tilted. A vision seized her, unbidden and fierce, shadows uncoiling from the tree line, not rogues, but something ancient and ravenous, tendrils of darkness slithering toward the Ironclaw's heartlands. She saw his realm aflame, castles of ice cracking under siege, blood staining the snow in rivers of red, a traitor's silhouette laughing amid the ruin. But woven through the horror was a thread of silver light, emanating from a figure like herself, Omega unbound, her hand extended to pull him from the abyss. The locket burned, hot as forge iron, its chain searing her flesh, and Neela gasped, doubling over as the images flooded her mind like icy water breaching a dam. Nyla! Darrick's voice cut through the haze, urgent and low, his body moving in a blur to her side. He knelt before her, one hand hovering near her shoulder, hesitant, respectful of the invisible barrier she clung to, while the other steadied the air between them. His scent enveloped her, smoke and storm laced with concern, grounding the whirlwind in her skull. The vision receded, leaving echoes that throbbed in her temples, the shrine's runes flaring brighter in response, as if the stones themselves bore witness. She clutched the locket, now scorching, its glow visible even in the growing light, casting prismatic flecks across her pale skin. Blood welled where the chain had bitten, a thin red line that mirrored the deeper wounds they both carried. "It's the shadows," she whispered, her voice fractured, eyes wide with the revelation's aftershock. The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered, the dam occulto manifesting not as madness, but as clarity, a pathfinder's sight, the goddess's mark on her bloodline, hidden until this lunar crossroads. "I saw them coming for you, for your realm, not rogues, but a curse, born of that mercy you spared. The traitor lives, twisting in the dark, and he'll drown your packs in fire and blood unless—" Her breath hitched, the vision's weight pressing on her chest like the snow's endless fall. The locket cooled slightly, but its pulse lingered, syncing with her heartbeat, a symbol now alive with purpose. Darrick's face paled beneath the scars, his golden eyes widening not in doubt, but in dawning recognition. He reached out, his fingers brushing the locket's edge, gentle, reverent, as if touching a sacred relic. The contact sent a jolt through her, instinct flaring, alpha to omega, but laced with something profound, a destined resonance that defied hierarchies. "The oracle's gift," he murmured, voice thick with awe and the melancholy of long-buried hope. "My seers spoke of a pathfinder, an omega unmarked yet marked by the moon, who would reveal the key to my throne's salvation. I thought it legend, a cruel jest from the goddess to taunt my failures." His hand lingered, the warmth of his palm seeping through the metal, and Nyla felt the bond deepen, empathy transforming into an inexorable pull. He saw her not as weak, but as the fulcrum of fate, the one whose visions could unravel the traitor's web, turning his guilt into redemption. The wind rose, howling through the obelisks like a chorus of ancestral voices, scattering embers into the dawn sky. Snowflakes stirred anew, dancing around them in a silvery veil, the frozen pool cracking faintly as if the earth itself shifted under the revelation's weight. Nyla pulled back slightly, rational fear resurfacing amid the spiritual tide. This gift had cost her everything: exile, scorn, and now it bound her to a king's peril. "I'm no oracle," she protested, though her voice lacked conviction, the locket's glow fading to a soft luminescence. "Just a rejected Omega, seeing shadows that no one believes." But Darek's gaze held her, ethical resolve shining through the guilt, his presence a steady flame against her doubt. "You are the key," he said softly, the words of vow etched in the air, heavy with the destiny they now shared. "The goddess chose you to heal what my choices broke, not as servant, but as equal. Together, we face the shadows, or they claim us both." The confession hung between them, the shrine's light pulsing in affirmation, blood from her scorched skin dripping onto the snow, staining it red like a seal on an ancient pact. Nyla's heart raced, the Dom's manifestation a double-edged blade, power born of pain, linking her exile to his throne in a web of fire and fate. As the sun crested the ridge, gilding the pines in reluctant gold, the weight of realization settled. Darek rose, offering his hand, not in command, but invitation, and Nyla hesitated, the locket warm once more, whispering of paths untrodden. The wind carried a distant weevo, urgent and calling, as the first threads of their shared destiny tightened, pulling them toward confrontation's edge. "Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen." The sun's reluctant ascent clawed higher, gilding the shrine's obelisks in a deceptive warmth that belied the frost still gnawing at the edges of the world. Nyla's hand trembled in Darek's grasp as she rose, the locket's chain a faint scar against her throat, its silver now etched with the morning's light like a vow half-formed. The vision's echoes lingered in her veins, a spectral chill that warred with the heat of his touch, alpha fire meeting omega shadow, destiny's inexorable weave. Yet as they stepped beyond the sacred circle, the pines parted to reveal a path scarred by fresh tracks. Not rogue paws, but the deliberate prints of a hunting party, their scent laced with the familiar musk of Silverfang. Her pack, Alaric's pack, the past, clawing back from exile's abyss. Fear coiled in her gut, visceral as the wind's bite, carrying whispers of howls that weren't distant anymore, close, insistent, threading through the snow-laden branches like accusations. Darek's grip tightened, protective yet yielding, his golden eyes scanning the tree line with the wariness of a king who knew betrayal's scent all too well. "They come for you," he murmured, voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones, stirring the bond's fragile roots. Empathy had bound them in the shrine's refuge, her gift revealing her as pathfinder to his redemption. But now the world intruded, demanding judgment on the fractures they'd each fled. Nyla's heart pounded, the locket pulsing in warning, its warmth a counterpoint to the cold dread pooling in her chest. Freedom or love? The choice loomed, sharp as thorns, as the first figures emerged from the mist-shrouded woods. Alaric led them, his form imposing under a cloak of iron-gray fur, flanked by betas whose eyes gleamed with the pack's unyielding hierarchy. His gaze locked on her first, dark and possessive. The alpha who had cast her out now circling like a wolf, reclaiming lost territory. "Nyla," he snarled, the word laced with scorn and something darker, regret, perhaps, or the hunger of one who sensed a rival's shadow. Behind him, the pack fanned out, their breaths clouding the air, weapons glinting in the pale light, axes etched with pack runes, bows strung taut against the wind. But it was the figure at Alaric's side that iced Nyla's blood, a lean man with eyes like polished obsidian, his smile a serpent's curl. Thorn Blackveil, the traitor whispered of in Darek's confessions, exiled from Ironclaw yet thriving in shadows, His alliance with Silverfang, a web of ambition spun from old grudges. Darek stiffened beside her, his free hand drifting to his sword's hilt, the runes thereon flickering blue as if sensing kin in the peril. The air thickened, charged with the metallic tang of impending blood, the snow crunching under boots as the group halted a stone's throw away. Weavos rose from the rear ranks, a chorus of judgment, echoing the pack's verdict on her madness. The visions that had foretold shadows like these now manifest in flesh and steel. Nyla's visions sharpened in the tension, fragments assaulting her. Thorn's blade plunging into Ironclaw's heart, Alaric's hand claiming her as trophy to seal a pact, flames devouring thrones under a blood moon. The locket burned, hot as accusation, forcing her to confront the truth. Her exile had been no accident, but Thorn's subtle poison in Alaric's ear, twisting prophecy into threat. "You dare return, Omega?" Alaric's voice cut through the wind, his eyes flicking to Darek with predatory assessment. "And with a fallen king? The goddess mocks us with such pairings." Laughter rippled through his betas, but it died as Darek stepped forward, his presence a bastion of quiet fury, the scars on his face stark in the light. Nyla felt the pull of him, instinct urging her to his side. But reason screamed retreat, freedom and solitude, away from alphas who wielded power like chains. Yet love's ember, kindled in battle and revelation, whispered of redemption. Standing with him meant facing the past, not fleeing it. Thorn's gaze slithered over them, his voice silk over venom. Ah, the merciful king and his visionary pet. How poetic. Your sparing of me, Darek, was a gift. I've woven it into empires. Join us, or watch your realms bleed. The words struck like claws, reopening Darek's wounds. Nyla saw the guilt flare in his eyes, the ethical core that had spared a life now twisted into ruin. He drew his sword slowly, the blade singing free, its edge catching the sun like lunar fire. "Mercy was no weakness," he growled, voice resonant with the melancholy of lost thrones. "But betrayal demands reckoning. For my queen, my son, for all you've stolen." The confrontation ignited. Alaric lunged first, shifting mid-stride into wolf form, a blur of gray fury aimed at Nyla, claiming her as his or punishing her defiance. She dodged, heart slamming, the snow yielding under her feet as she snatched a fallen branch, its bark rough against her palms. Darek intercepted, his blade clashing with Alaric's claws in a shower of sparks, the impact reverberating through her like shared pain. Thorn circled, directing his allies with subtle gestures, arrows whistling past to pin them in the clearing. Blood scented the air, Darek's arm reopening from the night's fight, a red rivulet tracing his skin, mirroring the thin line on her throat from the locket's burn. Nyla fought not as victim, but as Pathfinder awakened, her visions guiding her strikes, a warning cry as she shoved Darek from an arrow's path, her body slamming into his in desperate sync. They moved as one, back to back once more, the bond of visceral force, his strength her anchor, her sight his shield. Alaric shifted back, panting, eyes wild with rage and dawning doubt. "She's mine to judge," he spat, but Thorn's laugh cut him short, revealing the puppeteer's hand. "Fool, she's the key to more than your petty claim." The moral crux fractured the fray. Darek could strike Alaric down, avenging her rejection with alpha dominance, claiming power over compassion, or forgive, sparing the rival whose scorn had forged her resilience, choosing love's redemptive path over war's throne. Nyla saw it in his hesitation, the blade poised at Alaric's throat, golden eyes searching hers amid the chaos. "What is strength?" she whispered, voice raw over the clash, the locket's pulse urging mercy, if not choosing to break the cycle. Thorn seized the moment, lunging with poisoned dagger, but Darek pivoted, not to kill, but to disarm Alaric, hurling him aside as he parried the traitor's strike. Blood sprayed from Thorn's shoulder, hot and accusing, staining the snow crimson like a judgment rendered. The pack faltered, loyalty cracking under the truth's weight, Thorn's manipulation exposed in the vision. Nyla cried out, her words painting the shadow's full horror. Alaric rose, gaze shifting from possession to shame, the alpha rival humbled not by defeat, but by the choice to spare. Thorn fled into the woods, a shadow swallowed by pines, his howl fading into the wind's lament. Silence fell, broken only by breaths heaving in the bloodied snow, the sun now high, casting long shadows that spoke of paths diverged. Nyla met Derek's eyes, the bond sealed in forgiveness's fire. Love not as conquest, but as liberty granted, war averted for compassion's crown. Yet the dilemma lingered, spiritual and searing. Had they chosen rightly, or merely delayed the blood moon's call? The locket cooled against her skin, a quiet sentinel, as the wind carried echoes of Weavos unresolved, pulling them toward rebirth's unforgiving forge. The sun hung low now, a blood-orange sentinel bleeding into the horizon, casting the bloodied clearing in hues of fire and shadow that mirrored the turmoil churning within Nyla's soul. The snow around them was a churned canvas of crimson and white, the metallic tang of spilled blood mingling with the pine-scented wind that whispered through the pines like ghosts of choices half-made. Alaric and his pack had slunk away, their howls fading into reluctant submission, leaving the air thick with the echo of Thorn's fleeing snarl, a shadow unbound but not unbroken. Derek stood before her, sword sheathed but his form taut as a bowstring, golden eyes searching hers with an intensity that stripped away the last veils of denial. The locket at her throat pulsed steadily, its silver warmth a counterpoint to the chill settling in her bones, as if the goddess herself urged her toward the precipice of rebirth. Nyla's breath came in shallow gasps, the weight of the confrontation pressing on her chest like the frozen pool's unyielding surface. Freedom had been her exile's promise, solitude over subjugation, the Omega's path carved alone through the wilds. Yet here, in the aftermath's hush, love's ember had ignited into flame, demanding union not as chains, but as salvation. Derek's choice to spare Alaric had mirrored her own buried mercy, turning war's blade toward healing, but the cost loomed. Thorn's escape meant shadows would coil tighter, his poison seeping into realms and packs alike. Her visions flickered at the edges of her mind, flames devouring Ironclaw's spires, Silverfang's howls silenced in red snow, unless they forged something unbreakable. Sacrifice? To stand alone once more, her gift a solitary burden? Or Cura, binding her light to his darkness, Omega to King, in a union that defied the hierarchies that had scarred them both? She stepped closer, the snow crunching softly under her feet, her hand rising unbidden to trace the fresh blood on his arm, the same wound from the rogues, reopened in Mercy's fray. The touch was intimate, visceral, her fingers coming away slick and warm, the scent of iron evoking the locket's hidden lock of fur, soft against her skin like a mother's unspoken plea. Derek did not flinch. Instead, his hand covered hers, calloused and steady, the heat of him seeping through her like sunlight piercing storm clouds. "Nyla," he murmured, voice roughened by the day's toll, laced with the melancholy of a king who had tasted redemption's edge. "The traitor flees, but his web endures. My guilt birthed this storm, sparing him once, dooming so many. If you walk away, I understand. Your freedom is no less sacred than my throne's shadow." His words pierced her, stirring the ethical core that had survived rejection's thorns. What was destiny, if not the freedom to choose compassion over power? The wind rose, carrying distant weavos that mourned the fallen, the sun's descent painting the obelisks in the distance with fiery runes, as if the shrine itself bled light into the gathering dusk. Neela's heart thundered, the bond pulling taut, a spiritual tether woven in battle's forge, revelation's glow, judgment's mercy. She saw it then, in the golden depths of his eyes, not dominance, but partnership. The Alpha's fire yielding to the Omega's unyielding sight. The locket thrummed, hot as a brand, its chain a faint red line against her throat, symbol of bloodlines entwined, rejection transmuted into strength. "No," she whispered, the word avow exhaled into the cooling air, her free hand rising to clasp the locket, drawing his gaze to its luminous silver. "Exile taught me solitude's lie. Strength isn't isolation, but choosing to heal what the world breaks. Your mercy spared Alaric, as mine sees the path through shadows. Thorn's curse binds us, but our union, it could unmake it." Tears welled, hot against the wind's bite, tracing paths down her cheeks to freeze in crystalline trails. She pressed her palm to his chest, feeling the steady drum of his heart beneath the fur-lined mantle, ragged from thorns and time. The contact ignited something profound, a rush of warmth flooding her veins, the goddess's gift manifesting not in vision, but in union's quiet power. Her prophetic light seeped into him, easing the guilt's vice, while his resolve armored her fragility. Omega and Alpha merging in a rebirth forged of mutual surrender. Darek's breath hitched, his arms encircling her with reverent care, pulling her into the shelter of his frame. The world narrowed to this, the press of his body against hers, solid and warm against the encroaching night, the scent of smoke and blood enveloping her like a cloak. The locket caught between them, glowing softly as if absorbing their shared pulse. He tilted her chin, his scarred thumb brushing away a frozen tear, eyes blazing with the fire of acceptance long denied. "Then we face it together," he said, voice a resonant promise, the melancholy lifting like mist before dawn. "Not as king and outcast, but as equals in the moon's design. Your light redeems my shadows, Neela. Love as proof, not prize." His lips met hers then, tentative at first, a brush of warmth that deepened into a kiss, tasting of salt and iron, snow and flame. It was no conquest, but a sealing, sacrifice of old wounds for Kura's embrace, union born from the crucible of choice. The kiss broke as the first stars pierced the velvet sky, the wind's howl softening to a sigh, as if the wilds bore witness to their rebirth. Nyla pulled back slightly, her hand still over his heart, the locket cooling to a gentle hum, its silver now a beacon etched with their blood's faint stain. Empathy had transformed into unbreakable bond, the ethical dilemma resolved in compassion's quiet victory, power yielded for love's transcendent hierarchy. Yet even in this moment's grace, the spiritual undercurrent stirred. Thorn's flight promised trials ahead, a blood moon's shadow on the horizon. They turned toward the path, hands entwined, the snow yielding under their steps like earth welcoming new roots. The pines whispered of journeys unfinished, Weavos distant but calling, as rebirth's flame kindled within them, a promise of realms healed, destinies reclaimed. But the night deepened, the moon rising full and silver, casting their silhouettes long and intertwined across the frozen earth. In its light, Nyla glimpsed a final vision. Not ruin, but renewal. Packs united under a banner of mercy, thrones rebuilt on foundations of shared fire. The locket pulsed once more, a heartbeat of affirmation, as they ventured into the wilds, Omega and King, reborn in each other's gaze. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive. The moon's silver gaze lingered on the horizon, a silent sentinel over the bloodied clearing where shadows of the day's fray still clung to the snow like reluctant ghosts. Nyla's breath misted in the deepening chill, her body aching from the confrontation's toll, the scrape of claws on her arm, the bruise blooming where Alaric's lunge had grazed her side. Yet it was the deeper wound, the one carved by choices half-made, that throbbed most insistently. The locket hung heavy against her chest, its chain a faint red wheal on her skin, warmed not by fire, but by the pulse of destiny's insistent call. She stood apart from Derek now, the space between them a chasm filled with the wind's mournful sigh, carrying echoes of Thorn's fleeing howl into the gathering dusk. Freedom whispered to her still, a siren's lure born of exile's solitude. Turn away, vanish into the wilds. Let her pathfinder's gift light only her own shadowed path. But love, that redemptive forge, pulled counterwise, demanding union as the price of true rebirth. Derek watched her, his form etched against the dying sun's embers, golden eyes reflecting the inner fire that had spared Alaric's life and exposed Thorn's venom. Blood crusted his wounds, dark rivulets frozen in jagged lines down his arm, the scent of iron sharp in the air like an unspoken oath. He made no move to close the distance. His ethical restraint, a quiet nobility that stirred the empathy she'd felt since their first shared breath in battle. "The shadows recede for now," he said, voice low and resonant, threaded with the melancholy of thrones reclaimed yet fragile. "But Thorn's web spans realms. My mercy birthed it, and only facing it together can unweave the curse. If sacrifice is your choice, Nyla, walk free. I've no right to bind what the goddess set adrift." His words hung like frost crystals, each one a philosophy etched in the cold. What was power, if not the freedom to choose compassion over possession? Nyla's fingers traced the locket, its silver surface catching the moon's first rays, illuminating the faint stain of her own blood from the revelation's burn. Inside, her mother's lock of fur whispered of losses unhealed, rejection's sting, the pack's howls that had branded her weak. Her visions surged unbidden, visceral flashes, Thorn's obsidian eyes gleaming as he rallied rogue packs under a blood moon, flames licking Ironclaw's icy spires, Silverfang's borders crumbling in rivers of red. She saw herself in the heart of it, not fleeing, but standing, her light piercing the dark, not as oracle enthroned, but as partner, Omega fire tempering Alpha steel. The gift, once a curse that exiled her, now bloomed as proof. Faith against despair, destiny not as chain, but as chosen path. Tears welled, hot against the wind's bite, tracing salty paths that froze on her lashes like stars fallen too soon. The snow crunched under her hesitant step forward, the world narrowing to the heat radiating from him, smoke and storm enveloping her senses like a mantle long denied. Rational fear clawed at her. Alphas claimed, Omegas yielded, kings commanded, outcasts endured. Yet in his gaze, she saw no hierarchy, only the mirror of her own fractures. His guilt a shadow to her shame, his resolve a balm to her isolation. The locket thrummed, sinking with her heartbeat, its warmth spreading through her veins like liquid moonlight, urging the rebirth that rejection had stolen. Sacrifice would preserve her liberty, a solitary wanderer's creed, but union promised cura, a healing woven from mutual surrender, love as the ultimate redemption, not reward. "I choose you," she whispered. The words a breath expelled into the night, raw and irrevocable. Her hand reached for his, fingers intertwining with a grip that spoke of battles shared, visions unveiled. Derek's breath caught, his free arm drawing her close, the press of his chest against hers, a visceral anchor amid the wind's rising wail. She felt the steady thrum of his heart mirroring her own. The bond igniting fully now, a spiritual blaze that chased the chill from her bones. His lips brushed her forehead, scarred and gentle, tasting of salt and resolve. "Then we are reborn," he murmured, voice thick with the weight of absolution, his guilt easing like mist before the moon's rise. "Your light mends what my choices shattered, not in submission, but in equality. Together, we turn shadows to dawn. The kiss that followed was no frenzy of instinct, but a deliberate sealing, slow, profound, his mouth claiming hers with the tenderness born of pain transmuted. It tasted of blood and snow, fire and frost, the locket caught between them glowing softly, as if absorbing their union's essence. Nyla's world tilted, senses alive, the rough weave of his mantle under her palms. The metallic tang on his skin, the distant weavo softening to a harmonious chorus under the moon's approving gaze. Introspection flooded her. This was no youthful fancy, but a tragic redemption, Omega rising not behind the throne, but beside it, her Pathfinder's sight the key to realms healed. Philosophy wove through the embrace. What was rebirth, if not choosing love over the wild's empty freedom? Faith had triumphed, despair's chains broken in the forge of their shared gaze. They parted as the moon crested fully, its light bathing the clearing in silver, turning the bloodied snow to a tapestry of renewal. Derek's hand lingered on her waist, a promise etched in touch, while Nyla clasped the locket, its pulse now a steady hum of affirmation. The wind carried scents of pine and distant fires. The pines whispering of journeys ahead, thorns pursuit, pacts to unite, curses to unravel. Yet in this moment, the ethical dilemma resolved into spiritual peace. Power yielded for compassion's crown, destiny embraced as liberty's truest form. They turned as one toward the shadowed path, silhouettes merging under the lunar veil, Omega and King stepping into the wilds not as fractured souls, but as a singular force, reborn in blood and moonlight. The night enveloped them, weavos echoing like ancestral blessings, the locket's glow a beacon against the dark. In its light, Nyla glimpsed the horizon's promise, thrones rebuilt on mercy's foundation, shadows banished by united flame. Rejection had been her crucible. Now, love forged her into royalty. The goddess's design complete in their entwined steps. The snow yielded softly, the world remade in the quiet rhythm of hearts aligned as rebirth's eternal fire kindled within. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.